Hey guys, Philosopher here, and today I have one of my most important videos. This is a video where I'm going to talk a little bit about how the game is being transformed by Scopely and what it means for you in your roster and what you should be doing going forward. The last time I did a video like this, I called it the Great Reset, talking about what happened last year. Now I'm calling this one the Treadmill, and I want to talk a little bit about what the Treadmill is and how this change came about and what it means for your roster. So let's get right into it. I will say that to explain this change, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about where things were before. Okay, so when I started this game back in March of 2020, during right when the pandemic was becoming a thing, you only needed to build one team. And I've talked about that in other videos where you would build one team that you could use in raids. You could basically use the same team in arena, or you could maybe make some tweaks. You'd have a couple different characters, something like that. Maybe you'd build 8 characters instead of, 2 teams of 10. But you'd essentially could run the same characters in arena and raids, and you could have a very narrow roster and be fairly successful in this game. War was an issue, but generally speaking, you could do most of what you're able to do in this game by just building, 5 to 10 characters. So at the time, Black Bolt was the hot legendary at the time. And if you wanted to, you could whale out on Asgardians to get 5-star Asgardians to unlock Black Bolt. And that was it. You knew what the cost was. You knew what those offers were. And you could make a decision. Do I want to whale out to get Black Bolt now? Or do I want to wait another 3.5 months to get him on the second run? All right. There was a certain predictability about the game. The cost was fairly limited. That has changed over, the past 2 years. Obviously, now we have to build multiple teams, right? We need to build 4 different raid teams, bio, mystic, mutant, and so forth, tech. And, what that has done is it's led to players, essentially saying I'm raid only, right? I'm not going to build war teams. I'm just going to focus all my resources on raid, because you now need to build so many more characters. 4 raid teams of at least 5 characters. Sometimes you need more to swap in, right? Like in the tech section, for most players, I think the right strategy is to do something where you build a big Kestrel and Doom, and then you just kind of swap in other characters as you can on nodes just to save your gear. But, players have been doing that, trying to get by and keep up in this game, despite the higher character requirements. Well, this is something that's made it manageable, and I think my advice from players has generally been to focus on the characters that are going to have longevity, focus on characters that are going to help you in multiple game modes, particularly the most important game modes. And that's really been what the philosophy of my channel has been based on, about, hoarding resources, spending them carefully only when they're going to help you for the future. And most of my most important content on this channel has been focused around those ideas. You may have noticed, for example, I have not done my top 10 to invest in videos in quite some time. Those were always my most important videos. They were the videos that got the most likes and views and all that. I don't do this for the likes or views, but that, definitely was, popular because, frankly, it was a discussion of where you should be investing resources in the game. Here's my list from January, and you could see the concept here. The point was, maybe at the time, it's like, look, Gamora might have been on a top 10 characters in the game in January, but I didn't think she was good to invest in for the future, and I was trying to give you characters I thought would have a long shelf life based on their kits. I haven't been putting this out because the concept, now that we have this apocalypse system, this scourge event system, it really changes things. I already had here special case web warriors because Scopely's been designing characters differently. They, instead of making it so there's like some 1 or 2 characters on the team that have a lot of value everywhere, like, for example, the Marauders, when they came out, about a year ago, or 2 years ago, excuse me, when they came out a couple years ago or a year and a half ago, they had a couple characters that were real stars, right? Mr. Sinister, Emma Frost. Those characters had a lot of value everywhere and maintained their value for some, extended period of time. You could invest in those individual characters, just like I'm saying, here you might want to invest in Omega Red much more heavily than the rest of Weapon X, because he's going to have value in Dark Dimension Legendary section for a period of time. You could do that, but Web Warriors are different, right? They were a team that really work well together. They don't have a lot of solo value. You can use, Ghost Spider or OG Spider-Man in Dark Dimension, or throw them on another team, but they're not superstars in that regard. And they also are not. They're good, but they're not anything special outside of raids. Well, so I had them as a special case here. But one thing that you may not see on this is anything about legendary requirements. I always said on these lists that I just left off legendary requirements because they were just part of the cost of getting a character. In other words, for Omega Red, you needed to have, your Gear Tier 14 Winter Soldier, but I'm not putting him on this list because all he is just a cost of getting Omega Red. So what do you do in the Scourge system? What do you do now with characters like the Web Warriors or the Dark Hunters, right? We're now in a situation where you don't know exactly what the cost is for a legendary, and the cost can be very, very significant. So if you look now at my Web Warriors, they are all Gear Tier 16. Now, if you have been watching my channel, you know that until this Scourge event, they were Gear Tier 14. So I brought them all the way up to Gear Tier 16. I bought a 6th red star on Scarlet Spider. I bought a 6th red star on Miles. And not only that, there's a hidden cost here. For these characters, I ended up spending well over 1 million blue ions in this event. So she's always been Raider, but I put Fortifier on her. For some of these other characters, I actually tried multiple other, potential, classes. So it wasn't just Fortifier, but if you look at some of these, I think, maybe, was it Miles? I even tried, here you go, not only Fortifier, I tried Skirmisher for removing certain buffs, right? Doing, or trying to land, I think I needed Focus or something like that. The point is, I had to do this stuff to make sure I got this through the Scourge event with an absurd amount of Scourges on my roster. Similarly, with the Dark Hunters, I already had these characters at Gear Tier 15 because I am, a content creator and I stream all the new characters at Gear Tier 15. Plus, I do care about war, and I'm at a higher end alliance in terms of size and all that. But still, for a lot of players, this was a huge investment you basically needed. And I still spent, tons of ions on these characters, switching him to Skirmisher or whatever, putting Raider on some of the others, trying to, make it so that the amount of RNG, the amount of retries on it were manageable. And by the way, I mean, this is something, you may say, well, with Philosopher, you're only doing that because you're trying to get like a huge Morgan Le Fay. And I will say, I was at 31st when I completed. I've run this event 4 times. Okay, twice, all 4 times. You could see at least the start of my runs on stream. This one I did knowing I was 31st last night. I'm 35th now. I'm sure I will be out of the top 50. All I really care about is being in the top 500. So, because I'll spend the 1,200 dark promos to get her to 5 red stars. But I did all that, to get the 7-star Morgan Le Fay. The reason I'm pointing all of this out to you is this is the cost of getting a 7-star legendary. Previously, what was the cost of me getting a 7-star legendary? It was getting Gear Tier 14 on 5 characters. And the cost has gone up with this leaderboard system, which is something that I had predicted. Cost goes way up. And for many players, I am not even hit that hard comparatively, right? Because I am a player who's got tons of resources, tons of hoarding, tons of, I've spent quite a bit, right? So I have all of that. But mid-game players were doing things like investing in villains, right? For the first time, they're like, oh, crap, I need to bring up my Lady Deathstrike. Now I need to bring up, I've got to invest in my Sinister for the first time now that he's been reworked, or Sabretooth, or whatever, to get through the villain section. Or they're investing in teams to have sack teams in the heroes nodes, or whatever it may be. The point is, for all players at any level, there's a certain amount of investment that is required, unless you are somebody who's just happy getting the bare minimum, which is fine. And for those players, I think, are winners in this system. But for most players at least who are, I would say, playing the game in a non-casual way, they at least are trying to get 4 stars or 5 stars or something. Even my free-to-play cousin's trying to get the 4th star or whatever on his Morgan Le Fay. There is a certain element to which you're going to be trying to keep up. And this is why I call this the treadmill. So now the page, we now understand what this is going to be like. There are going to be 3 more horsemen coming before Apocalypse. Cerebro has indicated that they will be running another time. Each horseman will run a second time before Apocalypse. At least that's what he suggested. He said for sure Morgan Le Fay will. The other horseman he suggested will also run before Apocalypse. So this means that we're going to, in rapid succession, be getting more and more legendaries. They've increased the number of legendaries per year. Okay. And legendary runs per year. And they've increased the requirements at the same time. On top of all that, you may say that they've been effectively introducing more characters per patch. You may say, wait, Philosopher, no, I've done the math. It's actually the same number of characters they've always done. But I don't know if you've noticed, but they are including reworks now much more regularly with their characters, which have some positives and negatives, right? The positive is for some of you who have, let's say, an old investment you've done in Jessica Jones or in Captain Marvel, that's fantastic for you. You're like, hey, now I can make use of that. But usually they're doing this with characters that are older where the investment hasn't kept up, right? My Captain Marvel's here. Until yesterday, my Jessica Jones was basically level 1 with no gear. And realistically, part of what they're getting in these events is they're making it so effectively you're getting 2 or 3 or 4 additional characters you have to bring up, right? In this last patch, you didn't have to bring up Elsa, but she's part of the Dark Hunters, and you need the Dark Hunters to compete for the Scourge, so there you go, right? Ultimately you have to invest in an older character that's just been reworked. So they're increasing the number of characters that are going to be released effectively through these reworks. So what does this mean for you? It means, Scopely is trying to make it. They're trying to work against people like me and others who try to hoard our resources and are careful about our investments because they're increasing requirements, trying to get you to build very wide rosters. They don't want you to skip any teams. In fact, the game director for Scopely had said that some time ago. We didn't realize quite what that meant, but he doesn't want any team to be skippable, right? Back in the day, Dark Hunters would have been a team that many players skipped, right? It's not even the best war offense team. So how many players are going to invest hard in an above average war offense team? Some, but many aren't. They're not going to invest as heavily. So what do you do? Now, just to be clear, I think you have to assume going forward that every team that's released could be necessary for the next Scourge. Every single team, you should assume, may be necessary. Maybe not, though. You don't know for 100%. I'll give you an example. Young Avengers are an excellent team. They're not only good in they were not only helpful in the Scourge as a sack team for me on the first couple nodes, they also were They're very useful in the Avengers Tower. They're very useful in the Cosmic Crucible that'll come out, and so on. But they're just a war defense team at the end of the day, and many of you just can't afford to put a lot into this team, especially since it has very high gear requirements. So, for most players, what I would suggest is hold your resources. Get the shards and hold your resources. Basically, what Scopely's going to do is, no matter how many times I asked Scopely directly, several times before the Morgan Le Fay Scourge event, to let players know what they would need, what the node requirements would be. They did not respond to my direct requests. I made them literally directly to Scopely employees. So accordingly, you just have to assume that they're going to wait till the last minute to let us know, just like they did this time, what you're going to need. So my suggestion is just hold your resources, only spend what you absolutely need. Obviously, if you need your raid team, for example, do what you got to do. You got to get through your lane. Obviously, if you're in an alliance that cares about war and you need your new war offense team, do what you got to do. But keep as many resources as you can so you have a store of them. Now, I will just say, I fully expect that even I am going to start running out of resources. I'm not whaling as much in energy as I was. I'm frankly, just because I'm a little down on Scopely. I'm really not whaling any at all right now on energy, or very little. And ultimately, just they're making it so that no one's going to have complete stores. And that's just the reality of what this is. But I think if you are somebody who's super into this game and really wants to keep up, I think what you have to do basically is not only hold your resources, but if you want to have everything, you're going to have to, the only way to avoid their panic offers like they had during the Scourge event, right? You need a Mystic gear. Here's a very expensive offer. You basically have to constantly whale in energy, constantly use that energy to build up, stores of gear and just hoard it. If you're free to play, it's basically going to be similar. Hoarding game, you're just going to have to accept less. And some of you may, like I said, some of you may be winners out of this, but all because you are never going to get a legendary anytime soon. So I think that's good for newer players. But the reality is, pretty much every single player is a loser in this system. So because even new players now have to build so many more teams to catch up before they could just build one team. So what I would just say is, understand this for what it is. And if you are a player who I hate hoarding, I just want to build what I want to build, understand that comes at a cost. So I don't know how I'm going to remake my content, but one thing I do know is that I'm going to be even more extreme in terms of how I run my own account with the personal philosophy I have towards it, because this Scopely has made it so we're completely in the dark. We have to be prepared to build basically everything. That's the treadmill. None of us are going to be able to fully keep up, and we just have to accept that unless you want to spend an absurd amount of money on this game, which I do not recommend. All right, guys. If you like this video, smash that like button. Subscribe to this channel. If you have comments, questions, cheers, jeers, happy, sad, angry, mad, you can put it below, or you can go to my Discord. That's linked below. You can also go to my Twitch stream. That is linked below too.